In this video, you will discover how to make your podcast audience not want to buy your stuff. So look, my name is Anthony Winery. I'm the co-founder of GetMoreListeners.com, a company helping entrepreneurs of podcasts turn a slow growth show into a rapidly growing positive ROI show. Over the last 4 years, I've interviewed and coached 350 plus podcasters, and I'm also the co-host of Why Your Podcast Isn't Growing, which generates around $10,000 of attributed sales each and every month. And attributed sales essentially meaning we're using our podcast as a top of funnel to generate leads for our back-end high-ticket coaching offer. And then, of course, we're closing deals because of the listeners who listen to our podcast. They're going to call, become a client. That's the process. But of course, this isn't about me. It's about you. So let's dive straight in, breaking down how not to make listeners want to buy your stuff. So number one, pitch immediately and often. So start every single podcast episode with a hard sell. Don't bother to introduce yourself, your content. Just dive straight into a pitch fest. Letting people know you've got a new festival coming up, or you have a new retreat, or you have a new program. This is the number one way of turning people off, of repelling new listeners. Again, without providing any value up front, just going straight into pitch fest. Now, the logic here actually to me makes sense in terms of why someone might go down this route. Because let's say, for example, you're a podcaster, you might believe that, you need to frequently talk about your product and your services in order to increase the likelihood that you actually make a sale. So by keep offering it, your product remains top of mind. Now, again, this sounds logical. It actually kind of makes sense when you think about it. But why it fails is because when you have an immediate and frequent pitching, it fails to keep up the crucial stages of a customer relationship. So that's whether that's building awareness, building interest, and building desire. People buy from brands and individuals that they trust. And if someone doesn't know you yet, and if they've just discovered your podcast, or maybe they're a current listener, but you haven't provided any value up front, it's going to be very hard for them to kind of want to take that next step in your relationship. So what to do instead? What we focus on is really developing a content strategy that naturally leads into your offerings. Start by creating engaging episodes, providing value up front that establishes you as an expertise and naturally builds actual trust with your clients, and then introduce products and services either softly or just naturally as you've provided the value. Again, you're kind of extending your arm for your listeners to have a further relationship with you. But when you start by pitching, it doesn't really give you much time to warm up. And that's a second thing that most people skip out on, which is ignoring the art of warming up your audience. Now, this is very similar to the first one, which is kind of just pitching. Well, this one is essentially just skipping over providing real tangible value, kind of giving surface level knowledge and value to your audience, where you give them the what and the wow, but not really the how. Your whole job is to help your audience as a entrepreneur of a podcast solve specific problems through focused content that's helping them every step on their journey from their transformation. If that's from going fat to fit, helping them through that journey. But some people don't warm up their audience properly. Some people don't really understand the importance of actually providing samples of your best product, of providing the most amount of value you can on the podcast, not withholding too much, because people can smell that out. And the worst thing is, when you hold back valuable content because you're worried people won't buy from you, you inevitably self-sabotage because the content you're providing to your audience isn't as good. Therefore, people don't want to buy from you. So again, you have to warm up your audience first in order for them to see the real value of wanting to work with you further. And you do that by genuinely providing incredible value. Value so good, people feel like it shouldn't be free, that you should be charging for it. And that's something that's helped us out tremendously. Now, again, the logic here is really like, why this happens. So why do people end up just like, not warming people up? Well, it's a sense of urgency for a quick return on your investment, to have the podcast be a positive ROI asset, to accelerate your sales process, and hoping that when you pitch faster, you're going to convert people a lot quicker. And again, it makes sense when you break it down like we've done. You have to reciprocate. You have to kind of build up a reservoir where your audience feel like they need to give back to you. So why it fails? Essentially, not warming up your audience disregards the psychological principle of reciprocity. Honestly, this word gets me every single time. Reciprocity. Oh my God, that's awful. Essentially, reciprocation, right? So the sales principle of nurturing leads. So it's really, again, important that we engage our audience the right way, provide them so much value that they just feel like overwhelmed to the point where they're like, you know what, I'd love to work with this person. Or wherever they are in their sales cycle, not everyone's going to be ready to buy, but if you're warming up slowly and providing so much value, when eventually, if they are in a stage in their life where they're looking to buy and have someone kind of guide them through that process, you're going to be the first person that comes to mind. But if you then provide incredible value up front, if you then warm people up properly, they're not going to think about you to buy, right? They're going to go to someone else who has provided them that value, who they feel like they owe that to. So what to do instead? Again, focus on providing immense value before asking for anything in return. Use your podcast to educate, inform, and entertain your audience, thereby building genuine and real relationship with your audience where, again, when they come to the point of wanting to buy from someone, they're going to come to you. Once you've established this connection and you've demonstrated your actual value, then the sales pitch makes a lot more sense, a lot more inviting, and is way more effective. You give, and then ask for something in return, and that's kind of, again, the reciprocation going on. Number 3, let your guests overshadow you. Now, again, you don't want to be some kind of psychopath and absolute maniac who doesn't want to, have their guests talk. You want to be that, and you don't want to be that host who just talks over their guests all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But here's the thing. If you're always focused on your guests and you never highlight your own expertise or service, and you allow your guests to take center stage, which, by the way, they should do, you're essentially ensuring that all the interest in purchasing a service or a product is directed towards them because the spotlight is on them. Now, the logic here is essentially you bring on a guest on, they're an expert, they're influential, and that can boost your podcast appeal, the credibility, and all that good stuff. I get it. And it's also great for your network, right? They can share different perspective, and a bunch of value comes from that, which I totally get. But here's the thing again, if you're not the person who's providing the value consistently, then it's very difficult for people to want to buy stuff from you when you're not the one who's constantly providing the value. You're facilitating the value, which is great. But again, when you're trying to sell your own services, you also need to have additional content where you're the main focus. So why this fails? Well, again, you're consistently having guests overshadow you. It diminishes your authority as a host, depending what type of show that you do. Not always, but sometimes it can do, right? And this can shift the perceived value about you, the host, versus the guest. Again, having listeners seek out solutions from your guests. Again, nothing wrong with that, but it's having a balance. So what should you do instead? Well, have a balance of actual guest episodes and solo episodes. Now, I generally believe if you're a podcaster and you're an entrepreneur with a show and you have a product to sell, it's so important to have solo episodes where your audience get to spend time with just you, where you're positioned as an authority, where you get to share your expertise, where you can strategically pinpoint yourself and have a spotlight on you, where you're the one sharing all that value. And again, you're able to talk about your product in a different way, consistently provide the right amount of value, and have people have the affinity towards you more and more and more. We recommend to all of our clients to include solo episodes, and I have to say they average perform so much better. The fourth thing, keep your podcast focus super broad. So again, avoid being niched down, cover random topics, have loads of different guests come on, talk about loads of different things, and not really knowing who your podcast is for or what it's really about, but just kind of being a free-for-all. And the logic here is why this happens is you're kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to cast a wide net, so the more people I can target on my podcast, the more audience and more listeners I can attract to my show, hoping to maximize reach. But again, this is kind of a fallacy, because if you have a broad show that's vague and hasn't got a focus, without a clear niche, how the hell are you going to develop a content strategy that resonates deeply with your listeners consistently over a prolonged period of time? You won't. So how the hell are you going to then get people to build rapport, the like, know, and trust from you when you can't get them coming back and listening to future episodes? And how the hell are you going to help generate more sales for your business or for yourself when you can't get people to come back to listen to your content and you can't influence them to take a specific action, that being engaging with your product or services? So what the hell should you do instead? Well, the first things first, just have a focus. Who's my show for? What topics do I cover? What pain point am I helping my audience solve? Then develop a content strategy that's super focused on helping your audience solve those specific problems. For us, we help entrepreneurs of podcasts turn a slow growth show into a rapidly growing positive ROI podcast. That's the entire premise of our show. And how we do that is by helping gain clarity on why your podcast isn't growing. So you see, again, it's a very clear focus. We know who we're going after. And when you have a clear focus, it's so much easier not only to target your audience, but to consistently provide value, to get them coming back for more, and to influence and take the next step. And the best part is when you have a focused podcast and you have a focused product on the back end that you have something to sell to, there's an alignment. It feels natural that I have a coaching program to help podcasters grow on a one-on-one basis or in a group settings, and then the content is focus on helping, again, our listeners through that exact same process, right? So look, last but not least, delivering an unenthusiastic pitches. So when the pitch itself is super monotone, uninspiring, and lackluster, it's kind of like someone's reading an ad read. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of ads. However, I do like myself an engaging, hyper-focused, hyper-entertaining ad where I know the people, the hosts, are taking a mic, they're having a good time, they're having some fun, and they're actually going for the pitch. They're not just being kind of monotone, a bit boring, or maybe like not fully invested in, kind of half-assing it. Now, why does this happen? Now, I get it. Like when someone's super enthusiastic, really giving the massive pitch, going all in, people might feel uncomfortable kind of selling, or maybe feel like they're being way too aggressive, worrying that their listeners are going to feel like they're trying too hard. So that, again, this kind of leads to them convincing themselves that the less pitchy pitch is better, when in actuality it fails because you're being unenthusiastic, because you haven't got that emotion, that vigor, that conviction, and that kind of repels people. It's a bit more, I don't know, again, have you seen those pitches or those sales or ads where it's actually super engaging, it's entertaining, and you can tell the creators really going for it, or the entrepreneurs really going for the pitch? You always leave with a smile on your face. You always leave so much better because you've absorbed their energy. But when it's like, oh yeah, so I've got this thing and I've got this product and it's not really really high energy, you're not really going to be that excited, right? So sales often is driven by an emotional response, and we can't forget that. People buy based off emotion. People will buy when they feel excited. People will buy when they're interested, and people will buy when they deeply connect to an offer. But when you have a lackluster pitch that lacks emotional triggers, people aren't going to buy. They're not going to take action, because why the hell should they? And again, think about it as a transfer of energy from yourself to your listeners. So what should you do instead? Well, here's the thing. Actually be passionate. Actually be enthusiastic. You should be roaring and ready to go to pitch your product, because it should be the right product that's going to help change your audience's life, to help change your listeners' life. And you just talk about your product and your service in that way with that much passion, and transfer that energy from yourself to your audience, illustrating again the positive impact it's going to leave in your audience life. That energy and that confidence in your pitch will lead to way higher conversion than trying to play it safe. Like, you know, on our show, we always make a joke that when it comes to pitching, our listeners and our audience should know, like, we're going to pitch the absolute hell out of you. And I hope you like it, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you don't, that's totally cool as well. But I'm going to give it a good go, because I want to show you I genuinely care, and it's just a lot more fun. So to recap, how to make your podcast audience not want to buy your stuff. Number one, pitch immediately and often. Completely ignore the fact that your audience needs to be warmed up properly, need to be provided value first in order for them to feel like they need to reciprocate. But start instantly instead of a pitch fest. Talk about your retreat, talk about events you have going on, talk about your new program without providing value upfront. That's the number one way to get people to not want to buy your stuff. Number two, ignore your content strategy and ignore the fact that you have to actually provide value upfront, good value, helping your audience solve specific problems to the point where they look at you as an authority figure, to the point where you've established your expertise, to the point where you've built deep trust. And don't worry about warming your audience up, and go straight in with a pitch. Number three, only have guest episodes and never present yourself as an authority. Now, of course, we joke and we jest, but it's great to have guests. It's great to get them to have a different perspective. It's great as an additional value add, and it's great for exposure at certain points in time. However, if you're trying to monetize your show and trying to generate, turn listeners into clients, it's going to be important that you have solo shows as well as an entrepreneur. Or at least I want to encourage you to at least, again, experiment and see what the results say. The fourth thing is really keeping your podcast focus broad and vague. Inevitably speaking to absolutely no one, covering a bunch of different topics, but having a content strategy that's positioned in a way to attract, engage, and retain new listeners, get them coming back for more future episodes, and then have them finally take the next step and buying a product or your service. And then a final piece is delivering a pitch unenthusiastically. Now, that's not what we want. Again, we don't want to have any of these things with your podcast itself. And of course, this is a play to talk about how not to get people to buy your stuff. Do the opposite. Don't pitch right away. Provide value up front. Share incredible content. Have solo episodes so you're positioned as an authority. Keep your podcast super focused and targeted, and have the content strategy focused on the audience you want to reach, nurture, and convert into clients. And finally, deliver your pitch with an insane amount of conviction and energy. And that's how you get listeners to want to buy your stuff. So look, my name is Anthony Wineri. You've been fantastic. I hope you got a ton of value from this action. I hope you got a ton of value from this video. If you did, be sure to let me know and leave a like down below. And of course, be sure to go through our back catalog, binge anti content. And if you want to see me pitch absolute life out of you, click the first link below and I'll break down how we help clients grow their shows.